We finally got it. We finally got a wet race this season. And although it wasn't as chaotic as, let's say, Hockenheim 2019, we did have a total of 7 drivers potentially going to end up on the podium. We're going to talk about it right now. Let's review it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another race review where we put all the races in the 2020 season calendar up against each other to see which one's the worst and which one's the best. Here is the current standings so far. It's another one of those races where things got underway before the race even started.
I'll be honest, I still don't fully know what happened because as we are Canadian, we are in a different time zone, so I was still trying to get those precious moments of sleep while all this was going on. But I wake up to see Giovinazzi has hit a barrier, and then Russell has lost part of his front wing and is trying to scramble back to pit lane, and I'm like, guys, hold it together.
Regardless of those 2 crashes though, all 20 drivers were able to start this race. However, some from the pit lane, which inevitably might have been safer for them, because we had an incident at turn 1.
The start of this race could not have been any more entertaining. You have Stroll getting away perfectly, which further cements the fact that I think he is one of the best starters on the grid. But Max, what happened? It's like his car just didn't want to get going. Everyone's getting past him. It is 3 cars lining up into the first turn. Ricciardo gets sandwiched by Hamilton and Ocon ends up the loser in this situation.
Bottas also ends up losing the rear of his car, so you have 2 cars doing a pirouette. But the man who surprised us the most off the opening lap, Sebastian Vettel, goes from P11 all the way up to P4 after the first 2 turns, I think.
It was so nice to see some classic old school driving from Seb again. It really looked like he found his form.
From the opening laps, though, it did look like Hamilton was back in contention after suffering from a pretty bad qualifying in this race. He already made his way back up into 3rd place, so it looked like, okay, he's going to be the main challenger for the Racing Point. However, it seemed like most of Hamilton's bad luck happened on the opening laps in this race. Goes wide off one of the turns where Vettel was able to claim 3rd place, and sort of from there it started to drop back, saying his brakes were not really functioning.
As much as it was shocking to see the Mercedes kind of struggling, it was so nice to see Vettel and Hamilton wheel-to-wheel racing like the good old days. It was really interesting to see too, because it's clear that even with a struggling Mercedes, it still had a much better pace than the Ferrari. It's just that Vettel was able to plant himself in the right position at every corner to the point where Lewis is coming on the radio saying, I can't get past this guy.
After about the first 5 laps, Lance has already got a massive lead on everyone else. Apparently a whole pit stop on Hamilton. And the Red Bulls weren't making up as much ground as previously.
Which was a bit shocking because I personally think that the Red Bulls arguably had the best car on track this weekend, but just could not get that grip and couldn't get the performance they needed.
It was looking like it was going that way once everyone started switching over to the Inters. You have Charles being the first one to take the gamble, going onto the Inters pretty early off in this race. After they see him setting purple sectors, everyone decides, okay, now's the time. I gotta switch. From here, that's pretty much where the Red Bulls start applying lots of good pressure. And it looks like the race could flip over into their favor. Perez gets a bad pit stop, ends up ruining most of his gap that he had over the Red Bulls.
And since Perez essentially lost his lead over Max, this was looking really promising for an undercut, except for the fact that Max also had a terrible pit stop and was held in the box for probably twice as long as he should have been, but he still managed to come out ahead of Vettel and Hamilton. So you had the 3 of them bunched up together, and then just as it looked like we were getting back into the swing of things following all these pit stops, the camera cuts to Giovinazzi slowly pulling his car to the side of the road.
With now the gaps being much closer, Verstappen and Perez are the main focus right now.
And just as it was looking like Max was finally going to close that gap on Perez, he just got impatient and tried to make a move too quickly and completely went off. Dropped him down to 6th place.
So we get to about the halfway mark and it's looking like it's still anybody's race to win here. Each car's pace is fluctuating lap after lap. Cass, how did you view the first half?
I'll start off with my lowest score for the first half. I put the racing at a 6. which some people might think is low, but in my opinion, it's because most of the action was just cars following each other not to crash. Aside from Hamilton and Vettel, we didn't get a lot of wheel-to-wheel racing. It was just mostly mishaps of drivers going off the racing line. Drama and excitement, I both scored at an 8 because that opening lap was just chaos. And seeing the Ferrari jump so far ahead, you had spins, you had an unconventional leader, you had cars chasing each other down. I think a lot of the confusion and uncertainty kind of boosted my excitement, and we finally got our rain race. So that just gets it automatically a few more points right there. So this puts my score for the first half at like a 7.3, so I bumped it up to a 7.5.
Whereas me, on the contrary, like you said, I did score the driving a bit higher. I gave that an 8. For the first half, it did look like the racing points were getting away with it, but afterwards, you saw Perez and Verstappen, multiple laps where they were within a second, and to be frank, the DRS not being there helped this race. And we got to see Hamilton versus Vettel, some really good defending. In terms of my excitement, I did give it a 7. The first laps were great. The lead did look quite big, so I was a little on edge. I'm like, okay, they might hold this off. In terms of the drama outside of the opening lap, few spins here when drivers got close to each other. I did only score that a 6, totaling my overall score for this half a 7. And like you said, a wet race was great, although for the second half, it seemed like there was a new debate on our hands: intermediates versus slick tires. Albon's the next man who has his opportunity of chasing the racing points. However, he spins as well. Now that Albon spins out, his potential of winning this race is pretty much 0 now. And now it's once again Mr. Lewis Hamilton.
As soon as Hamilton's car starts to come alive, there's very little that can be done to stop him. So when I saw him catching up, I was like, oh no.
During this time when they are changing for a second set of intermediates, Vettel has another shameful pit stop. During this time, Lance Stroll went from Mr. Cool in the lead to Mr. I'm panicking, what's happening to my tires?
They were really hoping that the track was going to dry up even more to be able to switch it to those slick tires, but that just didn't really happen. And I think the call to pit Stroll just came a few laps too late, and it really compromised his race. Regardless, they do end up eventually pitting Stroll for another set of intermediates. Perez is leading for the time being, but Lewis eventually overtakes him for the lead and sets off from there.
And now it opens up the door for Ferrari to take a third place.
And then 2 rather confusing moments kind of happened back to back. All of a sudden, the camera pans to both Latifi and Grosjean spinning out. It just seemed like at this point in the race, the tires weren't working for anyone except Hamilton, because everybody was spinning. Ricciardo spun out of nowhere. Kimi and Verstappen are spinning side by side. And then Norris, who's been having a very quiet race, all of a sudden finds himself up in P8 after unfortunately overtaking Lance, which I was quite sad about.
Definitely some good performances both from Norris and Sainz finishing in 5th. Norris also getting the extra point with the fastest lap here.
And just as it's looking like the podium result is solidified, there is some more last lap drama, with Charles pulling off an overtake on Perez, but then locking up and going wide, opening the gap for Perez to reclaim second place, and Vettel just scooches on in there.
I was of course happy to see this because I knew Vettel had a great start and he was able to finish off on a high.
Yeah, I'm a little bit conflicted because both Ferraris drove a brilliant race. I personally wanted to see Vettel get it because he's just had such a terrible season. But Charles also drove brilliantly, and it's kind of a shame that one mistake on the final lap has overshadowed the rest of his really great drive today.
And of course, we can't go without mentioning Lewis Hamilton ended up pulling off the win in style in this race, showing a great performance for his 7th World Championship.
It really goes to show that Hamilton is such a dominant driver. He did absolutely deserve this championship. Obviously, I was a little bit conflicted because I was hoping for an unconventional podium, but also it's extremely fitting that he would have such a strong comeback drive and end up on that top spot on the podium for his championship winning race.
When looking at the second half for me, I did score it a bit lower. It removed some questioning of who's going to finish first place in this race, although there was still the excitement of who was going to end up on the podium. The driving was relatively consistent, I'd say. However, with the DRS, it did make it a bit easier for some people, and it was still pretty dramatic because we were seeing a lot of spins. So overall, I scored every point a 6.
My scores fluctuated a bit because my emotions were just going up and down like a roller coaster throughout the entirety of the second half. I still put the driving at a 6, just because you did get some good battles, some tight bunches together. For drama, on the other hand, I did bump it up at a 9, just because of all those spins. And then you had some retirements, you had that juicy battle on the last lap. It just kind of got my blood pumping. A lot of unexpected things happened in this second half, although it was also discouraging to see that the battle for the lead ended up just kind of resulting in the same old Mercedes dominance. So I put my excitement at a 7. Overall, scoring my second half a 7.5 again.
So the official CCF1 score for the Turkish Grand Prix is a 7. We finally got the wet race we've been asking for. Here's how the race compares to the rest of the races this season. Let us know in the comments what you think of this race. Do you agree or disagree with our thoughts?
As per usual, make sure to follow us on social media at CCF1 channel. Got lots of great content coming up for you very soon.
Don't forget to subscribe. We appreciate all the new subscribers. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like, and we will catch you in the next one.
Bye!